Welcome to the platform and Happy New Year to everybody. This promises to be an interesting year for the platform, as it will be for Nigeria, especially this being a political year. In this show, we don't forget also that there are also cultural components to the Nigerian story, and we'll always try to make sure we strike a balance. And that is why even we're starting on a cultural note today. And our first guest is a gifted writer, Chigozie Obioma, author of Fisherman and Orchestra of the Minorities, two books shortlisted as finalists for the Booker Prize. You're welcome to this show.
Thank you, Ogasam, for bringing me back, and for making me the first guest of your esteemed show this year. It's an honor.
Let's start with your latest engagement, and that is your work as a judge of the last Booker Prize. You've been two-time finalist with your first two novels, and then you're now a judge. Did you feel like a coach or a writer trying to be a coach, or a coach trying to be a writer?
That's an interesting question, and the analogy is apt in many ways, I would say, because you as a writer, you are among like thousands of people. So one of the things I found out quite early in my career was just the sheer amount of fiction that is published every year, especially in the US. It's a lot. Like we're talking like 25,000 novels, in a given year. So you are working in isolation as a writer, and then just hoping that somehow, your work will be well received. And then, you elevate to that point, and, you are elevated beyond others. So it is a little bit different than when you are the one deciding who is picked out of that crowd, that, behemoth crowd. So in many ways, it was a humbling experience for me. And it did teach me a lot. In fact, I came off from the experience thinking, I actually did not know what made a great novel. In practical terms, obviously, I thought I had like a good idea, but I had never really sat down and I articulated it and, just thought about it in a theoretical way. This is what makes a great novel, or a great short story or something like that. So I was forced to actually think through methodically through that very idea. And for me, that's one of the biggest gratification of the process.
Okay, now we're going through the process. You had to read a lot of books. Tell me the sacrifice.
Sacrifice. It was so you can see some of my bookshelves at the back. It's an insane pile, and there's actually more on this side. So what happened was we started in December. So the long list of 13 books was to come out traditionally in July. So, and we were looking at about, usually they say between 150 to 180 books. So last year we got 160. So if you had taken 150 books and divided it into months, 6 months, what it gave you was basically a book a day, So that was the thing. So, I had to develop this quick mental reading thing. I had to, take a sabbatical from my job, and so I could actually meet the demand. So it was very difficult. There were times when I wanted to quit. I would text my friend who was the chair She's a professor at Harvard, and she would be like, man, I'm thinking of the same thing, but hang in there, let us, put through it. Because, if things are happening, you might just wake up one day with a fever, or maybe your kids have like a bad day. So, but you had to read. If not, it will pile into the next day. So I had to devise various strategies, one of which obviously is to, I learned how to read while in the gym. So I would just take it out and be reading aloud to myself, while like running on the treadmill, this kind of thing, and stuff like that. So just to make sure that it's with me as much as possible, in the course of the day. In fact, I remember there was a time when my little boy was sick, and I had to like tend to him, and I will be feeding him food, and I have a book in the other hand, because I had to finish that book that day. So, but that said, you also had to come up with a kind of a radar, an internal radar, a kind of a measuring mechanism that also is a coping mechanism whereby you can determine from the first 60 pages or so, is this what my time, should I invest more time in this? So there were times when actually that was the case, even though I would say that that's a risky approach, but because, the book that won, for instance, The Promise, it's a book that in the first 60 pages, you're going to be asking yourself, what the heck am I? what is this? Because you know what I'm saying? So, because it's trying to reinvent the form, and so it's setting the stage and building the world. And for the first 40 pages, it just doesn't make sense. So, yeah.
It tends to be a lot of work. And then you have your own day job to take care of. You have other things you're doing that will have to suffer somewhat. So you have to privilege this assignment, over the others.
I had to put my novel on one side, and just not touch it for months. So.
Yes. And then this question too, as to when you get to this stage where maybe you are picking the finalist, was there a sense that you were presiding over the stage in which your works were, twice as finalist? Like, should I pick one and not pick the other? It would look like not picking myself. Did you get that kind of feeling?
Yeah, I made a joke at the first press conference where all the journalists were, where we were presenting, I think it was the shortlist or the long list, one of the two. I said that when I got the email, even though I have to be honest and say that I had the hunch that they were going to ask me at some point, because when I went up the second time, it was kind of a record-breaking thing, because it became like the first time that someone, because I've only written 2 books and both books have been shortlisted for the Booker Prize. So it often happens that, because it's so difficult to get into it, that people can get in this year and then 2 years later, later, or 3 years later, they come in, 2 books later, then they come in again, stuff like that. So I knew that they were going to ask me, but when it actually came, the email, I thought, oh, they want to destroy my career. that was the thing. So there was that fear. But then, so to answer your question, it was daunting. Like, they were obviously, so it's a kind of a ranked system. If you've been shortlisted before or won, you have like an automatic entry, so you could be entered for the prize. But the others, the publishers select from within the house who they put forward from their own books. So the first 2 months, December, January into February, all the books we read were from the great writers, like, Gal Goods was one of them. But you had the Shiguro, you had the Nobel laureates, Booker Prize winners and Booker finalists from years before. So it was, so you were just reading one great novel after the other, and it kind of has a way of messing with your mind and discombobulating you a little bit, because you start thinking, if, you know, I sit there and I come up with an idea and I think to myself, man, this is a genius idea, but you don't realize that 10 other people have thought of the same thing, you know, that you think is original or has this illusion of original. So of originality. So in many ways, there was the almost an epiphanic feeling that I had stumbled on something that, you know, would challenge me for the rest of my life, because, you know, I read so much. I read what almost, so I had a great sense of what my contemporaries are doing across all the continents, you know, writers from India, obviously the US, UK, you know, Africa and all of that. Nigerians, you know, were represented as well, you know, even though none of them made it into the long list. Yeah.
Did you feel a sense of torture there, not having Nigerians on the list, even though you saw them there?
No. You couldn't do that. I mean, they told us if there's anything that I would give the credit to the Booker Prize for. You know, I don't know if you follow the trends in the West today. The US especially is becoming a primitive country, and by that I mean there is an entrenched tribalism that is risible, is a laughable kind of primitive. So they tell us that we are tribalist and all of those things, and they say to Nigeria and other African countries, hey, stop being tribalist, you know, nepotism and all of this. I don't know that we have a worse kind of tribalism in the US. I mean, this is something that I could expand on before, but let me just give you an example. If you are a Black person who is running for a post, it is expected that every Black person must vote for you. If you are a woman, all the women must vote for you. So the idea of this was what you know, back when I was in Nigeria. I remember the first time I voted. There was a guy who was running then. The guy from the Nigerian business school, Lagos Business School. I've forgotten his name. Patu told me. You know, and I remember I went through all the things that all the people were saying, Obasanjo and the rest, and I said to myself, this is probably the guy who is going to do something for Nigeria. I'm going to vote for this guy. And my friends, you know, and family were like, there's an Igbo man there and you want to vote for, what is this guy? I mean, who is this man? You know, that kind of thing. So this is exactly what is happening in the US. So in that sense, all of the prizes here, all the, you know, like in Hollywood, for instance, they are becoming balkanized, and things are being judged on the basis of not just merit. I mean, of course, there are arguments that people make about the need to correct things, you know, historical injustice. But I feel like, you know, in that sense, much of what is happening here is outside of, you know, what is to be expected. So the Booker Prize stands outside of that. The only metric
some people have said.
So the only metric that we are told is the book good? Is it a great novel? So it doesn't matter whether you are from, you know, China or wherever. You don't consider this, is what I'm saying.
There have been some trend going on in international fiction now, especially recognition. You saw the case with Evaristo. You saw this one. They won the international prize for fiction. Also went to somebody from Africa.
Yeah.
Then now you saw the Booker Prize. The Promise also won from Africa. some say that there's a trend now to recognize Africa in the international fiction, international literary world. Do you see this as tokenism, or do you think it is actually an appreciation, genuine appreciation of talent from the continent?
It's an interesting question because one could concede that, yes, there is a need that was in the system to try and recognize certain things. And you could make the case that there's been blinders in the past. One example of that being that there seemed to have been a correlation between when the Booker Prize Foundation started putting like one African or Black person on the panel to the shortlisting and longlisting of the nomination of novels from the continent and Black people in general in recent times. So, but that said, I strongly believe that no matter what your prejudice is, for the most part, people often recognize great art. And I would give the example of a Japanese film by Kurosawa, the Japanese, director Kurosawa, which came out in, I think, 1947 or something like that. At that time, even now, you could not have a foreign film win, compete for Best Picture. But it not only won Best Picture, it cleared the Oscar in 1947, just 2 years after the World War II ended, when Japan was a major adversary of the US and the Allied forces. Yet the Oscar folks, who were very conservative at that time, recognized that film. In 1986, Achebe was shortlisted for the Booker Prize. This was like 35 years ago, when, there wasn't any of this agitation. And, so many people have won. Rohinte Mistry, Salman Rushdie, and all kinds of people. So I do feel like, because I'm saying this because I think there's a danger in weakening fiction, literature itself. Like if we start saying, okay, we want a Black person to win a particular prize, then what happens then is you are no longer following merit, right? You are just, you are doing maybe what you call tokenism, or you just ascribing on based on identity or something that is superficial to fiction.
I'm also fascinated with it, since we are talking about globalism and fiction. If you get global, can you be authentic? If a work of art wants to be universal, can it be authentic? Some writers who are not writing from the base of their writing tend to be a little aloof. Some people said even this Black American writer who wrote Giovanni's Room, what's his name now? I've forgotten his name now. That when he was living in France, as James Baldwin, that when he was writing from France, he tended to be more angry because he lacked the empathy of being in the milieu of his subject.
Well, for me. I think that's not a very strong argument, from the critics. But I understand and I appreciate where it is coming from. So I think it's born of an anxiety that is initiated from the Western academic, community. So there has always been the idea that what is good or what is great art is often in some ways protesting something. So it's an understanding that uh, art that is great has to be pushing back against something, usually tradition, or some form of injustice. So that's why in the West today, you see most of their work, what is mostly appreciated is some form of transgressive literature. So I do believe that you cannot constrain fiction. You cannot constrain art. Yes, Fela's demands for justice, in his music, extremely political music, is great, but it doesn't mean that he's greater than King Sunny Ade, who is singing about the beauty of of his culture, the word or flavor, someone like that. So they're just different dimensions of art. So that's it's a kind of a narrow view point. The folks who are saying, okay, there are some writers who are writing universal, or you have to reach for what they call authentic. What is authentic? What really is authentic? I don't think I understand what is authentic, given that the word as it is now, or in its composition, is very fluid. Look at me. I mean, I am in what, the American Midwest, but I'm an Igbo man through and through. Like, every day I think of, in fact, I think all that I'm concerned about is the history and the culture of my people. I mean, I have very little interest, and it's bad. I mean, I understand that is, I have almost little interest in American culture. I'm not interested in it. So I am here in some ways because I just cannot tolerate, the sound of constant generator. It gives me a headache. Like lack of security and all kinds of things. I would prefer to be at home. I mean, that is my country. That is, even though I don't really see Nigeria as an actual functional country, but the place itself and the people are my people, So there are a lot. So I'm here, for instance, because of my temperament. Anytime I come into Nigeria, I almost get high BP because I just rail. I guess it's from morning till night. It's not good for me. I have to have some kind of mental balance to be able to produce something, because I just get frustrated at everything. So in that way, so I choose to live here. So if somebody reads my work, and what they don't understand is this, for me, I think I write about a place better when I'm away from it. So if you were to actually think about it in a more practical way. So let's say that I want to describe this moment, right? So I want to just watch what is happening. I would just observe, I would just note down the obvious things, your very cute spectacles and your bookshelf behind you, the TVC producer with the basic scriptures, in the screen. These are the things that I'm going to write down. But if I say no, I'm not going to. So it lends itself to documentary writing. But if I were to say, okay, I will go back and rely on hindsight, I would write about this moment when it's gone, in the evening, in the night, when everything, time has passed. So what you come to understand is that you cannot remember everything authentic, the way it would be if you were writing it down now. So your imagination lends its own hand into what you produce. So, and writing fiction is supposed to be an imaginative work anyway. So I prefer, so if I'm in Nigeria, I can't write fiction about the place. I will just be writing about, what is happening in the moment. So it's better for me to again, I'm speaking about myself. I disagree with that. And I think that authenticity is in the mind, it's in the the faculty of the writer. If you look at someone like Kazuo Ishiguro, for instance, Kazuo Ishiguro
Yeah.
was born in Japan, but he doesn't even write about what's it called? He doesn't write about Japan, and he says, I write for the world, for a universal audience. So because he said that, does it mean that his work is inferior to somebody who says, no, I write? And people who say, oh, I write for Nigerians, most of the times they're just lying. They're just saying it because it's the thing to say, you know. So somebody will tell you, oh, I'm writing about Nigeria, and then their novel is set in America. And then they, you know, so it's a performance. Because if you don't perform that, then, you know, people will be like, oh, you're not woke or whatever. So you have to put on some kind of facade, which is not true. And then they tell you, the guy who is writing about Ordinane, you know, the Chi and the beliefs of the Igbo people, which nobody cares about, not even the Nigerians themselves, because they are now Christians. They've abandoned the religion of the people. That is the guy, because he lives in America. He writes for Igbo people, you know, so it's a narrow, in some ways, even a foolish debate.
Thank you for being on this show. You can join me in my column at www.samomashai.com, as well as my Twitter handle. And so thank you for being on this show. And until next time, be good.